Hello, everybody. Ted Huntington with another interview of a spectacular author. Today, we're interviewing Robin Leeman Donovan. Robin is the creator of the Donna Lee mysteries. Her first, Is It Still Murder, Even If She Was a Bitch? Won Robin an AMA Pinnacle Award. Her second book, I Didn't Kill Her, but that may have been short-sighted, was released in November 2015, followed by Why Did They Kill Him? He Wasn't Really That Annoying in 2017. She is currently penning the fourth book in the series, and she is also a recent winner of the Enterprising Women of the Year Award from Enterprising Women magazine. Robin is also the author of a blog, Menologues, which is a humorous yet informative look at the trials and tribulations of menopause by somebody who may have possibly been there. So she's a modern day Irma Bombeck for those who know Irma Bombeck. Menologues is republished on two commercial sites, Vibrant Nation and All Top, and she has won regional honors for social media at the AMA Pinnacles and PRSA Paper Anvil Awards. She was born in New Jersey and now resides in Nebraska, which must seem like a completely different world. Her career began as a high school English teacher before becoming an advertising exec in the early 80s. In 2001, Robin and three colleagues purchased the Bozell agency from its New York parent company. We'll talk a bit about that journey. Robin lives with her husband and her bulldog, Frank, and we will post links to all of Robin's books underneath this video, as well as a link to our sponsor, Women's Rights. And as I say in every one of these videos, please support them by subscribing to our Patreon page. Please welcome Robin Leeman Donovan.
Well, thank you, Ted. Thank you. I'm going to keep that and walk around with that introduction because I want everybody to hear that.
Well, I'm glad you like it. So first off, you have to tell everyone.
I loved it.
Oh, thanks. You have to tell everyone the amazing story behind the amazingly creative book titles.
Well, thank you. Well, I was running my ad agency and interviewing for new creative directors, and we were specifically hoping to find a writer. And I was talking to people in every large city. It was a time when everybody was looking for a job, so everybody came out of the woodwork and was really hungry to have an interview. And back then, they would also do a little bit of social media checking on you so that they could pump up your ego, because let's face it, if you don't pump up my ego, I won't hire you. And I was writing the first book and I was struggling because I thought, I really want to make this a series, but I'm not coming up with anything that I think is very clever. Like A is for alibi, B is for whatever, bankruptcy. So I was racking my brain, and I was talking to my business partner, and she said, forget that, forget all the pressure. She said, just write this book. Don't force yourself to look for a series. And so I said, fine. And just right off the top of my head, I said, is it still murder, even if she was a bitch? And I laughed. So I wrote it down. And I said, I know they'll never let me keep this because it's way too long, but I think it's funny. So I'm going to just use this while it's in the editing phase. But as I was interviewing all of these writers who were creative directors, all of these people who I feel like I can't hold a candle to them, they would ask me what I'm doing. And when I would say I'm writing this book, and I would tell them the title, they all really were getting a good belly laugh from it. So I said, you know what? I'm keeping the title, and I don't care if I have to fight for it, but I didn't have to. And I was lucky they were willing to let me keep that title. And I would say that's one of the things that has been, the most successful thing for me, because I think I always expected that my audience was women, and probably menopausal women, but I've been amazed at how many men have read it, and they come up to me at author fairs and say, no. It took me a while to realize when somebody comes up to me and just says no, that it's an answer to the question that I've asked them. So.
Well, tell me a little bit about the plot for at least the first one.
All right. Well, in the first one, Donna Lee owns an ad agency. She's a menopausal woman who owns an ad agency. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that back when I wrote it, we had protagonists that were 20 years old, gorgeous, Harvard graduates, brilliant, you know, perfect clothing, fabulous jobs, every man wanted them, or Miss Marple. And there was pretty much nothing in between. And I said, you know, I'm sick of these 20-year-old women, and they do some really, really dumb stuff. I mean, they all meet with the murderer without any backup plan, right? And so I said, what I want is not Miss Marple, but something in the middle that women can identify with and say, all right, I'm a little smarter than to meet the murderer in an alley at 12 midnight with no weapon and nobody backing me up. But, you know, so I'm going to handle this a little bit differently. So in this book, Donna Lee's, her former colleague has been brutally murdered. And you come to realize that she wants to get involved in the investigation, not because she's really thinking of herself as an amateur sleuth or that she's so caring, but that she really couldn't stand the woman and doesn't want to be accused of the murder. So it's very self-serving, her getting involved in the murder investigation, and it really kind of highlights a world that I live in, which is very highly emotive and a lot of drama and a lot of fantasy. And it's funny because I've had editors say to me, well, you know, these clients, these people are not realistic that you have these characters. And it's like, oh my God, yeah, this is what I live with every day. I see these people every day. I mean, you live in a world of academia and you're doing my editing, but you're not seeing what I'm seeing in my industry. So hopefully broadening some perspectives on, you know, various groups of people. This is what my industry is like, take it or leave it.
Now, did you go into it thinking I'm going to make this into a series of books?
I hoped that I would, but I didn't really believe that I would. After I wrote the first book, I mean, it was my baby. I practically carried it around in a pram and, you know, and didn't really get too excited about writing another book. I just wanted to focus on that one, and I felt really good about it. But for whatever reason, the second book just sort of started to materialize in my head. And I kind of was noodling around while book one was in the editing phase. I was kind of noodling around with the second book, not really having too many expectations. And it just sort of did materialize. So once the second book was written, then I also realized that writing a book gives me something to do while my book is being edited, because it can be a frustrating time. I mean, I had 5 editors on my first book, and each one of them had it for at least 5 months. So there was a big lag of time for me. And rather than bug my publisher, I could just be writing my second book. Once I wrote the second book, then I made up my mind I was going to write the third book. And that proved to be a little bit more of a challenge. The first one came like it was already all in my head. The second one was pretty easy to going. And the third one looked like it was never going to happen. but eventually it got there.
So tell me about the process of getting the publisher.
Well, in my case, I was lucky because I own an ad agency. And at the time I was really working a lot on my blog, Menologues. So then all of a sudden one day we got a client in my ad agency who was a publisher. So I thought, this is great because I've always wanted to write a book and I have so many questions, and I can ask this client. And I had started writing a book that was about the purchase of the company that we bought, the advertising agency. And it was a very painful book to write because it was a very difficult time. And, you know, it was more than a 6-month period where we didn't know if we would have any success or be publicly humiliated or be out on the street and, you know, with nothing. And the people around us behaved in a bizarre and frenetic manner that I think would be a fabulous movie still, if I could bring myself around to write it. But I had written about 1/20th of this book. And I spoke to my new client and said, I'm started this book about the buyback of the company, a little bit worried I could get sued. And he said, "Oh, you mean like, just people in general behaving badly?" And I said, "Kind of." And he said, "Yeah, I think you're fine." And I said, I don't really think that, I think I might not be fine." And he said, "Give it to me. I'll show my lawyer." So a week later, he came back and he said, "My lawyer wants to know, are many of these people dead yet?" And I said, "Not enough." But he said, "Maybe back burner that one." And then he said, "Well, what's your passion?" And I said, "Well, comedy, really." And that's how everything sort of fell into place.
Right. Well, that first book could have been either Mad Women or A is for advertising.
Could have been A is for advertising, or could have been A is for I stick the ads into your throat repeatedly, because it was more like that in my world.
Well, that would have been closer to your current titles.
It really would have. I mean, I think this one, if it comes out, it's going to be bloodier.
Now, you also mentioned a minute ago about 5 editors.
Yeah.
Did your publisher line you up with these editors? Were those editors that you found on your own? Because usually, you weren't an independently published author, but usually even with a publisher, you're on your own as far as finding an editor. How did that come about?
Yeah, no. The gentleman who started this company, the company that was my first publishing company, Right Life, he was an academic himself. And he was trying to make it easier for people who wanted to be authors but were put off by all of the challenges that you face. And he thought he had an easy way to do it. If we accept your manuscript, we'll do all the work for you and everything. We'll do the cover, although they didn't do mine. My company did mine. We'll do the editing. The only thing they expected me to do was the proofing, but they did everything else. And then they expected me to do speaking engagements. So, and then they set a level. I didn't start making money on my book until it sold so many copies. And so at any rate, it made it very easy for me to be able to do that. The interesting thing is, they had come up with all of these editors, and a lot of them were academicians. But my first editor was fascinating, because I felt a connection with him almost immediately when the book came back. Now, I mean, he thought I had way too many long sentences and had to shorten them. I mean, he had comments, but the majority of the comments that he wrote were, you're sitting in a restaurant and I don't know what it looks like. So it was really more of an opportunity to expand on what I had said without boring people. Because, sometimes you're writing and you're saying, is this just boring to everyone? Do they not want this level of detail? So I really, really enjoyed working with him. But when I say working with him, I got the manuscript mailed to me and I had all his notes on it, and I never spoke to him and I never saw him in person. So I contacted my publisher and said, gee, I would love to meet this guy. I feel a real connection with him. And she said, okay, he's in town. I'll set up a lunch for you. So she set up a lunch, and I arrived. He was sitting in a booth, and I walked over to him and he said, I used to be with the agency. Now, a lot of people say that to me because Bozell is an ad agency, and a lot of people, there's people all over the country and all over the world that have been with Bozell at one time. So, but there was something about the way he said it, because normally I would say, oh, what was your job or something? But it just, somehow it was different. So I just waited a beat, and he said, yeah, I was with the CIA during the Bay of Pigs. And I have to say, he was the most fascinating person you could ever hope to meet. And, and little old me, he edited my book, my cozy murder mystery. And he was fabulous. He was really good. I still keep a relationship with him. I've met, I think, 4 out of my 5 editors. And
That's great.
It was.
What a great story. Yeah, well, I wanted to go back to the formation of your agency, because you've previously told me about this, and since this is sponsored by Women's Rights,
Yeah.
I think the formation of your agency, even though it's not necessarily book related, is a great story of female empowerment. You have all women executives that are owners, correct? How did that
We
all
do.
work?
We do. Well, at the time when we were contacted by the New York office of the parent company, which was at the time Interpublic Group, and the CEO or the CFO in New York flew out and met with our executive committee at Bozell. And it turned out that ultimately 3 of us on the executive committee, 2 women and 1 man, agreed to buy. And then we brought in an outside contractor who had 30 years of experience in the food industry, had worked at ConAgra and created the Healthy Choice brand. So so the 4 of us got together. So it was 2 men and 2 women. And within probably the first year, the man that was not from an ad agency originally, but had worked with many ad agencies, said, this is a lot harder than it looks. And I think I could make more money and make it easier somewhere else. So we started a process to buy him out. Then some years later, our third partner, the male in the group, the other remaining male in the group, he kind of had a bit of a breakdown, and we had to start the process to buy him out. At that time, we did bring in another male partner, but since 2006, we've been 2/3 women owned. Our third male partner made it 5 years before he said, I'm putting up the white flag. This is more than I want to deal with. And so I joke, because we kind of have a joking, my one partner gets really mad at me, but we have a thing about, like, we're the Black Widows. We keep pushing men out, but we don't do it on purpose. It just sort of evolves that way, So yeah. So, and then in 2013, we became certified women business. So we are a women business enterprise officially.
Well, it's nice to know that times are very different now than when Mad Men was about going around in the 1960s, and women they had such a difficult time, and not just in the advertising world, but in the business world in general. Now you still have your agency. How do you juggle? You're a busy owner executive of an advertising agency. You've got a blog. You're writing these books. How do you juggle all that?
I am in the process of trying to transition into retirement. So I'm not as full-time as I was when I started writing the books, but it came about because I've always wanted to write books. I was an English teacher, every English teacher wants to write a book. And I always said, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. But I got to a place in the business where I was frustrated. And honestly, by that male partner, he was just a pain in the butt. And he was frustrating to me at every turn. And so I tried to see the value that he was contributing. And I tried to say, you deal with your stuff, I'll deal with my stuff. But there was that constant pressure. So I said, I really need to find some kind of escape. And after I had that conversation with that new client that was a publisher, I said, well, I've got to at least write something, because I promised him I would. So I sat down and started writing, and I had no idea how much fun it would be, because writing that original book was so painful. I could only write for short clips, and I'd have to stop because I would get depressed. But writing my comedic murder mystery, I was having such a fun time that I would find I could write from 8 in the morning till 5 at night on Saturday and Sunday. And it would just completely clear my mind. And I would have so much fun that I could deal with that week ahead. And that's actually what got me through, a very challenging time. And then that partner said he couldn't take the pressure. So out he went. And, but I got bit by the writing bug, and that's that. You know how that feels.
Yeah, well, when that's your passion, you make the time, right?
You do. Absolutely. That's right.
Well, it's always a pleasure chatting with you. I'm going to give you 90 seconds to give a sales pitch on your website, your books, anything.
All right. You know, a lot of people said to me, as the owner of an ad agency, you should write a book on something about business, how to do things. And I said, you know, the majority of those books I think have about 5 minutes worth of value, and the rest of it is just a lot of fluff so that they can sell a book. And that's not true of all of them, but is true of the majority, in my opinion. So I feel as though my cozy murder mysteries, dealing with the advertising industry and the types of personalities in the advertising industry, enlighten people on how to deal with some of those people that are a little kooky. You know, some of the most creative people we have are kind of nut jobs. And so, and you're always going to be, you're going to see that in your career. It's not going to be everybody. It's not the majority, but you're always going to have somebody or some people. And I think my book, it's fiction, but I think it teaches you how to deal with some of the crazy personalities. And I think it teaches you how to laugh at yourself, because one of the things I have is my protagonist, Donna Lee. She's not perfect. And I don't ever try to portray her as perfect, but her nemesis, if you will, Clovis Cordova Seville, is always, who's the most narcissistic person ever created, is always saying, Donna, you're always trying to grab the limelight. You're always, and you're not that good. And so she's always that, you know, that person to say, keep it real, honey, because you're not perfect either. So, so I feel like it's very relatable, because it really is a realistic look at what my industry looks like, but also women and how they interact with each other. I mean, there are certainly men in it, and you see how they interact as well, but you get a little bit of a closer look at, you know, how women do interact, and it can get a little bit crazy sometimes.
Well, it's always really is a pleasure chatting with you. I'm going to put links to your books and your website underneath, links to women's rights and our Patreon account. Please subscribe to that. Robin Leeman Donovan, thank you so much.
Ted, I want to make sure to thank you, because I want to thank you for everything that you do for authors. And I want to thank you especially for this effort that you're doing for female authors, because it's really needed and it's very much appreciated.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Bye.
Bye now.